Camp Mystic withdrew its application to operate this summer, but dozens of other Texas camps are still trying to get state approval to open. Today on the Texas Standard.
Texas Standard is a production of KUT Austin, KERA North Texas, Houston Public Media, and Texas Public Radio in San Antonio.
I'm Laura Rice. Corpus Christi's water crisis could soon mean people have to make big cuts in water usage, but there's concern leadership isn't prepared for the mounting emergency. A Texan in the Trump administration is facing an ethics complaint, why Agriculture Commissioner Brooke Rollins is on the defense. Abilene is trying to increase access to emergency care to a spread-out West Texas population, what they've learned. Plus, checking in on a new program for future space engineers and a new cafe offering opportunity in North Texas. That and more today on The Standard. From Burnett to Waco, Katy to Rockwall, hundreds of youth camps across the state have had applications pending for their licenses to operate. It's the Texas Standard for the first day of May 2026. I'm Laura Rice. At least one camp, however, is not reopening this summer. Camp Mystic, where 28 people died in the July 4th flooding, has pulled its application for its license to operate. The Christian Girls Summer Camp had been intent on reopening, despite some very loud calls for that not to happen, including from the families of girls killed in the flooding. Cece and Will Stewart's 8-year-old daughter Seal still has not been found after the deadly flooding. They said Camp Mystic's late decision not to reopen was not an act of grace out of respect for grieving families, but an admission that the camp is not safe and not prepared to handle an emergency. Camp Mystic has been at the center of investigative hearings in the Texas legislature this week to try to understand exactly why girls were left in danger when the Guadalupe River overtook its banks. The state has put in place new rules in an effort to prevent future tragedies, but camps across the state have been having trouble meeting the higher standards. In fact, as of early Friday morning, just 3 Texas camps were listed with new licenses to operate through this summer. With just weeks left before the summer camp season begins, many camp leaders say they support stronger protections for campers, but they also say the state's new approval process has been difficult and confusing. For more, we're joined by Sarah Bahari, trending reporter for the Dallas Morning News. Sarah, welcome back to the Texas Standard.
Hi, thank you so much for having me.
So as of your reporting earlier this week, only 3 camps are licensed this close to opening season. What's up with that?
Yeah, so the camps say that there are all these new laws. State lawmakers last year passed a flurry of laws following the July floods that killed 27 children and counselors at Camp Mystic. Under the new laws, camps are required to outline their safety and compliance plans in really thorough emergency plans.
Well, Sarah, give us some context here. What is it now that camps are being required to do before they can reopen this summer?
So camps have always been required to create emergency plans, but for the first time this year, they must submit those plans for approval to the Department of State Health Services, which is responsible for issuing the licenses. Camps are now required to install emergency warning and public address systems, provide mandatory safety training to campers, and distribute emergency plans to families. Some must build new cabins and move existing cabins out of dangerous floodplains as designated by FEMA.
So you spoke with camp operators who say the new process has been cumbersome. What are they being required to do exactly, and what frustrations or delays are they describing?
So sticking points have included issues as small as word choice. Camps are saying that they'll get a deficiency notice that says that they needed to delete one word or add one word. Sometimes they've turned in their emergency plans and then they get a deficiency letter, they respond, and they get a new deficiency letter with different input. So it's just really kind of confusing this year.
Okay, so there's also a lawsuit over one of the new requirements involving fiber optic networks to improve emergency communication. What's at the center of that legal fight?
So the camp operators say that it would not make their properties safer, it violates state law, and it would cost millions of dollars. Some camps are saying $1 to $3 million. You have to remember, a lot of these camps are in really rural areas where cell service is already spotty. So 19 camps have sued to stop that particular part of the law.
You also spoke with a lawmaker or had a comment from him, actually, whose district is really at the center of where a lot of the worst devastation happened. I was struck by some of his comments about this new law. What did he say?
Yeah, so State Rep Wes Verdell, he represents Kerr County, and he said that the bill was sloppy, the law was sloppy. He had voiced these concerns while lawmakers were rushing to pass laws after the horror of what happened. But he said that the laws would financially cripple these camps, create unrealistic timelines. He just said it was a bad law, and that now the bad law is causing what he called massive trouble for camps. He said it was an egregious overreach, and he's really hopeful that when the legislature meets next year, they will take up some of these issues.
What's your overall view on this? Are you getting the feeling that this is shaping up as a temporary growing pain in the first year of new rules, or something more like he was saying, that this is going to need to be revisited as lawmakers return to session next time?
I think it could be a mix. I do think there are just first-year kinks that needed to be worked out. And I think that camp leaders are still optimistic that licenses are going to be issued, that they are going to be open. Camps will be open, they think and they hope. But I do think that some of the camp operators are really hoping to push lawmakers to revise some of these laws. They were kind of under a deadline last year, and hopefully next year they'll have the time to sit down and see what they can do.
Sarah Bahari is trending reporter for the Dallas Morning News. Sarah, thanks again for your time.
Thanks so much. I appreciate it.
About 500,000 people around Corpus Christi could soon face critical limits on their water use. That's as the city continues to rapidly move toward a water emergency. The Texas Newsroom's Lucio Vasquez reports on mounting concerns about whether the city is really prepared for what's ahead.
Ashley Ortiz spends her days surrounded by water. At the laundromat where she works in Corpus Christi, machines hum and churn from morning to night. But at home, she says she has to be more careful about how water is used.
It's hard to learn how to conserve and not use if you don't want it, or remind your kids, like, don't let the water run.
For Ortiz and her 3 boys, cutting back on water has been a daily adjustment. And across the Corpus Christi region, just off the Gulf of Mexico, it's becoming a shared reality for more than 500,000 people.
It's just something that you never think you would have a problem with. Like, one day we might be out of water.
Corpus Christi's water supply is shrinking after years of drought made worse by climate change. 2 of the reservoirs the region relies on for water, Lake Corpus Christi and Choke Canyon, have dried up. They're now at less than 9% capacity.
So what we're seeing is those 2 reservoirs are at a historic, never seen before, low.
Peter Zanoni is the city manager of Corpus Christi. He says the city has already been restricting watering lawns and limits on washing cars at home for more than a year. Dead grass can be seen everywhere. A local water park has been closed. And it's likely going to get worse. Zanoni says the city is expecting to declare a water emergency by the end of the summer.
6 months from that point, supply would not be enough for demand. It's not that we would be out of water, it's that there would be a gap in supply to demand.
At that point, the city will be forced to have everyone cut water use. A proposed plan calls for a 25% reduction. So, why is this happening? It's a combination of several things. Less rain, more heat, and heavy demand from the local oil refining industry, combined with years of delayed planning. Corpus Christi relies heavily on rainfall to refill its reservoirs, but in recent years, that rain hasn't come, part of a prolonged drought across South Texas. John Nielsen Gammon is the Texas state climatologist.
Anytime you're in that sort of situation, the weather could shoot blanks for long enough, and eventually you can run out of water.
He says climate change has led to higher temperatures.
It increases evaporation losses from lakes and decreases soil moisture.
The city relies heavily on just a couple of reservoirs, so when those run low, the whole system is under stress. That impact is hard to miss. I'm standing in Lake Corpus Christi. Water's pulled back so far you can now walk into areas that were once completely underwater. There was probably 5-10 feet of water directly above my head, but now the ground beneath my feet is very dry. It's starved for any kind of hydration. It's a shell of what it once was. Dorina Mergoulet is the director of the Center of Water Supply Studies at Texas A&M University in Corpus Christi.
Relying on just surface reservoirs in an area like ours, it's not feasible for long-term sustainability.
Mergoulet says what's happening here is a warning about the limits of the region's water system.
There has to be contingency plans and looking at different sources of water.
The region has also grown over the last 2 decades. The population has increased by about 13%. More people means more water is needed. Corpus Christi is also a national hub for oil refining and exports, industries that use more than half of the region's water supply. City Manager Peter Zanoni says if dry conditions continue, the economic fallout could be massive.
And so you're talking about job loss, you're talking about a real potential for economic downturn in this region, not just Corpus Christi, but the 2 to 3 to 7 county region.
City leaders say they're trying to avoid that worst-case scenario. They've been increasing water imports from outside sources and quickly drilling groundwater wells under emergency permits granted by Texas Governor Greg Abbott. But city officials say these efforts have produced less water than hoped. The city is also exploring long-term solutions like desalination and water recycling, but those projects could take years to complete. Some of those same ideas were on the table years ago, but Zanoni says they were never moved forward.
You've heard about it in local government, the adage of kicking the can down the road.
Other fast-growing cities in the South, like Phoenix and Las Vegas, face similar issues: prolonged drought, rapid growth, and dwindling water supply. As Corpus braces for deeper cutbacks, the strain is adding to a growing sense of unease for residents like Ashley Ortiz. Back at the laundromat where she works, the machines are still running, undeterred by the looming shortage. But she's concerned for her children's future.
As a mother, it's like I don't want my kids to have to worry about something that we shouldn't have to worry about.
Ortiz says she loves living here, but the worsening water shortage may push her to move out. In Corpus Christi, I'm Lucio Vasquez.
Still ahead on the Texas Standard, some much more optimistic news out of the Texas Gulf Coast area. We'll take a trip to Kingsville to check in on an ambitious new degree program aimed at filling future-focused jobs. We'll also head to North Texas and a cafe with another sort of job mission. And a reminder, you never have to miss an episode of Texas Standard. You can subscribe via the Texas Standard podcast or find full episodes at texasstandard.org.
Support for Texas Standard comes from Texas Monthly Presents The Story, a docuseries about the state of Texas. Stories about our culture and what's at stake from the perspective of the magazine's writers, airing weekends on local PBS stations and streaming on the PBS website and app.
This is the Texas Standard. I'm Laura Rice. Today is National Space Day, and so it's a great time to check in on Texas A&M University-Kingsville as it prepares for the inaugural semester of its new master's program in space and aeronautical engineering. KEDT's Rob Boskamp has the details.
The universe is expanding, and so is Texas A&M University-Kingsville's Mechanical and Industrial Engineering Department. They're adding a Master of Science degree in Space and Aeronautical Engineering. The degree plan combines about 30 college credit hours of traditional aerospace engineering principles with developments in space exploration, satellite technology, and astrodynamics. Once completed, students are primed to pursue careers in space and aeronautical industries and national laboratories.
First cohort, we will kind of use many of the existing courses we have in mechanical where there is a lot of overlap when it comes to dynamics, when it comes to statics, mathematics. But down the line in future, we will have a space focus kind of track in the space and aeronautical engineering.
That's Dr. Vinod Kumar, Chair of Mechanical and Industrial Engineering at Texas A&M Kingsville. Before the grad program was established, the university had only a minor degree in aerospace engineering toward the end of a bachelor's degree. This fall, the master's program expects to start with between 5 and 10 students.
The job growth, the opportunity that we will have in South Texas in the space-related industry. We thought it's a good time to get started. Mechanical is one of the biggest departments in the college. In fact, it's the biggest department. It's one of the largest departments in the university also.
In that group, John Ryan Lawrence will be among those who will go where no Texas A&M Kingsville student has gone before.
What name derived from the Latin word imperator was used by the leaders Tolosa Midway? John Ryan.
Emperor.
Is correct.
He's also a former contestant on the KEDT TV academic quiz show Challenge.
The thought that I'd have the opportunity to be the first person in a space and aeronautical engineering program, of which there are only a handful of such programs in Texas, it's a lot to take in.
Lawrence, a Tolosa Midway High School alumnus, will receive his bachelor's degree in electrical engineering from A&M Kingsville in December. In the same semester, he will pursue concurrent enrollment and officially begin working on his master's degree in spring 2027.
I've always been a naturally curious person, so I've always had an interest in, how things work, how engines lift, all of the sort of dynamics of flight was what really drew me in.
That curiosity has served Lawrence in several high school organizations, such as the Law Enforcement Club and the Warrior Company of the Navy Junior Reserves Officers Training Corps, or NJROTC.
My JROTC instructor was a retired naval aviator. He was a cargo helicopter pilot and absolutely shaped the way I think about leadership and aviation and science.
His inspiration for his current path comes from 8 years' experience as a member of the Civil Air Patrol, the auxiliary component of the United States Air Force. It gave Lawrence the opportunity to fly an airplane for the first time.
That just sparked an interest in aviation that's been burning ever since.
Lawrence's grad school research will focus on material science, specifically with plasma interactions with ceramics for hypersonic vehicles and nuclear space propulsion.
And that has a lot of applications for hypersonic glide vehicles and reusable rockets. Being in South Texas, so close to SpaceX, and having Houston a couple hours away is definitely something that I believe is worth looking into.
With Kingsville being somewhat of a halfway point to several space stations in Texas, Lawrence's career goals could actually launch him outside the state.
I'd hope to want to work for JPL, the NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory. Last I checked, they're doing some propulsion research. Really, there's only a handful of labs in the world that are focusing on it, which is one of the downsides of being in that particular niche.
With the trajectory that he's on, he's aiming for the stars in more ways than one. I'm Rob Boskamp in Corpus Christi.
And you're listening to the Texas Standard. Texans with disabilities can encounter a lot of barriers to employment, which can limit their independence. Job skills programs aim to fill the gaps. KERA's Abigail Ruman takes us to a new cafe in Dallas County that's preparing people for future jobs in food service.
It's a busy morning at the MetroCare Cares Cafe, a professional kitchen on the organization's new campus in southern Dallas. The staff are preparing for lunch service and a catering order.
What's on the menu today?
I don't even know.
James Dunn is one of the interns working in the cafe today. He says he used to watch people in his family cook.
I saw them do it, so I want to do it too, because I always help out with my family.
The cafe serves about 100 people a day and handles catering orders, mainly for MetroCare employees. It's staffed by about 8 people completing a job skills training program. The interns are all people with intellectual and developmental disabilities who are at least 18 years old. Dunn helps the executive chef, Holly Vera Cruz, set up a taco bar in a MetroCare conference room.
Those ones you can put over there in case they need some extra, and you still have your lettuce left?
Yes.
All right.
Vera Cruz trains the people in the program. She says it's like having a classroom, but in a kitchen.
It's very exciting to watch the growth of them, to see their skills improve, their social skills. They're more communicative out here with our customers.
Dunn, who is 33 years old, and other interns are learning the ins and outs of food service, like cleaning, cooking, and customer service.
Which one, this one here?
Yes, sir.
which he hopes will help him get a job in the industry.
One day when I be on my own, I can do this, what they taught me.
That's first and foremost why we're doing this.
That's Carrie Parks. She oversees intellectual and developmental disability provider services for MetroCare. She says the internships range from 4 to 12 weeks based on what skills the participants need to work on.
To me, cooking is the ultimate education. So it teaches social skills and math and following instructions and customer service, and it's always a job that's needed.
Park says some other programs like this one have a wait list or don't train participants in all the skills they want, meaning people are stuck waiting for work experience or training. MetroCare's program adds more access for people with disabilities. Vera Cruz says the interns are excited to be in food service, but haven't had an opportunity to learn.
These individuals are now, when they leave here, are going to be looking for jobs, and please give them a chance. It'll be the best investment in their company, I can promise them.
Vera Cruz says it offers participants more than just skills for employment. She says she loves sharing the creativity and exploration that comes with food and cooking.
It's fun to broaden their horizons and show them that there's so much more out there when we're creating stuff back there. And they're learning to taste newer foods, and I think that's great for them.
Okay.
And put the beans in the bowl.
Okay.
James Dunn returns to the cafe from setting up the taco bar and does what he says is his favorite part, serving customers.
This is vegetables.
Dunn says he wants to help people, which is why he's here, and he sees this as a way to reach the other things he wants out of his life, like having a family of his own.
I'm gonna do this with my kids, and maybe they one day they can one day when they get on their own, they can be in my shoes.
Dunn completed his internship this month and is now looking for a job.
Okay, James, you ready?
I'm Abigail Ruman in Dallas.
Yes, I'm ready. You?
I'm always ready.
Support for Texas Standard comes from Texas Mutual Insurance Company, a workers' compensation provider that's been caring for hardworking Texans for over 30 years. More at texasmutual.com/expert partner. Support for Texas Standard comes from the beef-loving Texans at the Texas Beef Council, a community passionate about what they eat, where it comes from, and how it's prepared. Recipes and meal ideas at beeflovingtexans.com.
From the Texas Newsroom, I'm Matt Harab. 5 people are dead after a plane crash south of Austin. The Cessna 421C went down around 11:30 last night near Wimberley. Federal investigators are trying to determine the cause of the accident. Meanwhile, Attorney General Ken Paxton is investigating North Texas businesses he says abused the state's H-1B visa program. Our Tolawani Yosibemoa reports he's widening a probe that first began in January.
H-1B visas let highly skilled foreign workers work for employers who can't get what they need from the U.S. workforce. Paxton accused nearly 30 tech companies in North Texas of operating inactive ghost offices to sponsor foreign workers.
A ruling could come down today on whether to extend a court order halting restrictive new regulations on the hemp industry. Our Nathan Bernier has been following the testimony in Austin.
Hemp businesses are also trying to block sharply higher fees included in the new regulations. Retailers saw their registration fees increase from $150 per location each year to $5,000. Plaintiffs have said those fees amount to an unconstitutional tax that generates far more revenue than what's needed to enforce regulations. During the last day of the hearing, Dr. Timothy Stevenson with the Department of State Health Services was asked how long it would take the existing team of 7 inspectors to visit every hemp business in the state.
That would have taken between 6 and 7 years to inspect an establishment once.
The judge overseeing the hearing has said she would make a decision on whether to issue a temporary injunction in short order. I'm Nathan Bernier in Austin.
Sunday is World Press Freedom Day. The family of missing Houston-based journalist Austin Tice is using the occasion to draw attention to his case. Our Andrew Schneider reports the Tice family says they have reason to believe he is still alive and may have been moved from Syria to Iran.
Austin Tice was abducted near Damascus in August 2012 while he was reporting on the Syrian civil war. His sister, Naomi Tice, says the family has reason to believe he is being held by the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps.
With the regime change, we do think at that point, Austin might have been brought over to Iran during that time. Once again, this isn't confirmed, but we have strong reason to believe that might be the case.
Jason Poblete, an attorney who represents wrongfully detained Americans, says the U.S. government could be doing more to help the Tice family locate Austin and secure his return.
The U.S. government needs to do more for them and demand more of the Islamic regime and the Syrian regime to bring this American home and other Americans home.
Austin Tice has been missing longer than any other U.S. journalist. I'm Andrew Schneider in Houston.
I'm Matt Harrop in the Texas Newsroom.
Support for these Texas headlines comes from Texas Monthly Presents The Story, a docuseries about the state of Texas, our culture, and what's at stake from the perspective of the magazine's writers. Weekends on local PBS stations and streaming on the PBS website and app.
33 minutes past the hour Texas Standard Time. I'm Laura Rice. Before U.S. Agriculture Secretary Brooke Rollins was appointed to her current job, she was a leader at conservative think tanks, including the Texas Public Policy Foundation and the America First Policy Institute. Once Rollins officially joined the Trump administration, she was supposed to take a one-year break from associating with these groups, but that didn't happen, at least according to a recent complaint from a government watchdog called the Campaign Legal Center. Sky Chatty is a senior reporter for the news outlet Investigate Midwest. Sky, welcome to the Texas Standard.
Thank you for having me.
So Agriculture Secretary Brooke Rollins, who is a Texan, by the way, signed an ethics agreement before entering the Trump cabinet, saying she would resign from her positions with these conservative policy groups and take a one-year break from any involvement with them. Has that happened?
As far as we know, she has resigned. However, according to the Campaign Legal Center, she has maintained what they called close ties with these organizations that you mentioned, the Texas Public Policy Foundation and the America First Policy Institute. She's made at least 4 public appearances with these two groups.
So the group that's raised this complaint, the Campaign Legal Center, say she's received some benefits from this improperly. What do they say Rollins has received?
Yes, that's actually a big part of the complaint. And what appears to be the case is that America First provided a large bonus to Rollins after her nomination to Trump's cabinet was publicly reported. And these are all in public tax forms. America First is a nonprofit. But in 2024, America First reported paying Rollins about $800,000 in salary and bonus. However, when Rollins reported her income on her financial disclosure, which came out, she signed it in January 2025, she reported more than $1 million in salary and bonus from America First. Now, according to the Campaign Legal Center, they say that the timing of these payments raises concern because it could give the appearance that Rollins may not act impartially when it comes to fulfilling her official duties.
So has the Agriculture Secretary responded to any of this?
Yes. In a response to us, she said that she has followed all ethical guidelines, and she called the allegations from the CLC, quote, completely frivolous. I should say she did not address any of the specific allegations, such as giving speeches at these events, making appearances at events hosted by previous employers, and she did not say anything about the timing of these bonuses.
So the Campaign Legal Center filed their complaint with the Department of Agriculture's Inspector General, who conducts internal audits and investigations of the agency. You report that office experienced some relevant turnover, though. Can you tell us more about that?
Yes, this was actually one of the first things President Trump did when he returned to office last year. He fired these independent watchdogs called Inspector Generals at, I believe it was 17 departments, which included the USDA. The USDA IG had been on the job since George W. Bush was president. And the reason for these IGs is to make sure that the departments are fulfilling their duties and, make sure there's no waste or anything like that going on with the department. However, when these IGs were fired by Trump, the concerns were, well, who is going to take over for these positions, and will they be as objective as previous IGs? Well, we know in the case of the USDA, the new Inspector General is a senior advisor to Rollins. He's a man named John Walk, who served with Rollins in the White House during Trump's first term, and then during this past year, before he was IG, he served as a senior advisor to Rollins.
Does it seem likely that Rollins will face repercussions here, or does it seem like the way things are set up now that she might not?
It's a little hard to say. I will say when I asked the Campaign Legal Center about that, given what had happened with the IGs, and some Democratic senators had expressed concern about John Walk being able to perform his job impartially. And I should say John Walk said he would follow all the laws and fulfill his obligations to Congress. But these were questions that were brought up during his nomination hearing. The Campaign Legal Center told me that they had a very strong hope that there will be a full investigation into the allegations in their report. And they kind of left it at that.
Skye Chatty is a senior reporter for Investigate Midwest. We'll have a link to his full story at texasstandard.org. Skye, thanks again for joining us on the Texas Standard.
Thank you for having me.
Support for Texas Standard comes from Texas Casa. For a child in foster care, small moments today can have a big impact tomorrow. More on how lending time and support can help make a difference at becomeacasa.org.
It's the Texas Standard. I'm Laura Rice. In West Texas, distance defines everything. It's the space between towns, the space between neighbors, and, most critically, the space between a person in crisis and the help they might need. Abilene has been leading the way on addressing that gap, and now Texas is one of the few states in the nation modeling an alternative approach to policing when it comes to people experiencing a mental health crisis. We'll be digging into this issue over the next several weeks. Today, KACU's Josiah Wanell starts us off with an overall look at the problem.
In Abilene, a quiet crisis has been building for decades. It doesn't make the front page. It doesn't draw a crowd, but it is there every time a police cruiser is dispatched to a home at 3 a.m. because a son is hearing voices or a daughter is spiraling into a darkness her parents don't understand. By the late 2010s, the Abilene Police Department realized they were responding to thousands of calls that had nothing to do with crime and everything to do with a medical system that had simply run out of room. We have reached a point where the county jail is the largest psychiatric facility in the region. To understand how we got here, we have to look at the system we inherited. This isn't a new problem. It's a 60-year-old ghost. In 1963, President John F. Kennedy signed the Community Mental Health Act. The vision was bold: empty the overcrowded state hospitals and treat people in their own communities. But then the world changed. Professor Brian Shannon has spent over 3 decades teaching mental health law at Texas Tech University. He explains what happened when the funding never followed the vision.
The last act that President Kennedy signed before he died was a comprehensive community mental health bill to try and help establish community-based authorities or services for people with mental health issues in the community. The dollars just didn't follow.
What did follow is a gap. People instead filled the streets, the emergency rooms, and eventually the jails. Professor Shannon calls what happened next something worse than failure.
We've almost seen in this country, in our state, a trans-institutionalization going from one type of state facility, the state hospital system, into the jails and prisons, often because of a lack of adequate community care.
Judge Steve Leifman watched this transfer happen in real time. After 3 decades on the bench in Miami-Dade County, he has become one of the nation's foremost authorities on mental health and the justice system. When he started his career as a public defender, the picture looked different.
When I
started, there was probably one wing of one floor housing people with mental illnesses in all of Miami-Dade County. By the time I had become a judge, we had 3 of 9 floors housing people with mental illnesses.
3 of 9 floors. And that main floor had a name.
We had this notorious mental health floor in the jail called the 9th floor, which had been renamed by a reporter as the Forgotten Floor. It was abusive. It was overcrowded. The corrections officers were not trained well. There was a lot of abuse going on, and it was a nightmare.
The 9th floor was not an anomaly. It was a mirror held up to a system that had chosen to route people with serious mental illness through criminal justice rather than health care.
Instead of recognizing that we had put a lot of people at risk, both with and without mental illnesses, and developing a system that actually worked for this population, we decided we would use the criminal justice system as a way to deal with it.
And when the system could no longer pretend it was working, Judge Leifman found himself staring at the failure from the bench and forced to make an impossible choice.
And that my only option was to release him back to the street and tell him to go get help. It was a joke.
He doesn't say it with anger. He says it with the exhausted clarity of someone who has repeated it 1,000 times, hoping someone will hear it.
The system was set up to fail, and it failed perfectly.
If the national crisis is a storm in rural West Texas, it's a hurricane with nowhere to make landfall. In an urban center, you might have a psychiatric emergency room, a dedicated crisis line, a mobile response team. In the big country, you have distance and silence. Professor Shannon has seen it firsthand.
And so you've got a lot of wide open spaces, counties I've sometimes even heard referred to as frontier counties.
In frontier counties, there is often no immediate alternative to a police response. No crisis center, no mobile unit, no clinician on call. Just a dispatcher, a patrol car, and an officer trying to do a job they were never fully trained for. Dr. Andy Keller is the president and CEO of the Meadows Mental Health Policy Institute. He has spent his career building systems that get ahead of a crisis rather than react to it. He warns that when police are dispatched to a mental health crisis without clinical support, the situation becomes dangerous, not because anyone intends harm, but because the tools don't match the problem.
If you only send a police officer and they have limited help and they have limited training, you could have an argument break out. You know, if the paramedic goes to shake my hand and I take my hand away like this, the paramedic's probably not going to charge me with resisting arrest. But if the officer does and they don't and it's a bad day for them and I pull my hand away too hard, who knows how that escalates? So why even put the officer in that situation? They don't want to be in that situation.
Nobody wants to be in that situation. Not the officer, not the family, and certainly not the person in crisis, who in many cases has no idea they're sick at all. Before Texas could build a solution, it had to reckon with the truth it had been quietly avoiding. This wasn't just a system under strain. It was a system pointed in the wrong direction entirely. The tools were wrong, the training was wrong, and for a long time, the conversation itself was forbidden. Professor Shannon remembers when mental illness wasn't something you just named out loud.
When my brother first got ill, there was still a great deal of stigma. There's still some today, but persons with a diagnosed mental illness, you didn't talk about it. There was concern that, maybe it's because I've been a bad person, or there was even this, maybe there was bad parenting, a lot of misunderstanding.
For decades, that misunderstanding shaped policy. It shaped who got help and who got arrested instead. But Shannon has witnessed something slowly.
I've seen a big shift since I was first involved in this area with broader openness to discussing mental health issues.
And with that openness came a harder question. The question that leaders in Abilene began asking under Police Chief Stan Stanrich. Not how do we control this, but how do we care for this? That question would eventually change everything. But first, the system had to be willing to say, plainly, out loud, what it had become and what it was costing.
You can continue to do what you do now, which is releasing people without treatment. That accomplishes nothing, makes matters worse, wastes taxpayer dollars, threatens public safety, or you can release people with treatment.
That is the choice that Texas began to make. I'm Josiah Winnell in Abilene.
Support for Texas Standard comes from HEB and the My HEB app, which is available for download, and shopping fresh departments like seafood, produce, bakery, and deli, and scheduling curbside pickup or home delivery. More at heb.com.
This is Sean Petrie with the Typewriter Rodeo, and we are a group of friends who type poems on the spot on whatever topics people want. Chasing Dreams for listener Jenna. It is not a race. It is not even a marathon. It is more of a hike up a mountain, and sometimes you catch a glimmer, maybe a glistening across a lake. Jump in! Swim! And when you get there, the glimmer is gone, but you are breathing heavy with the excitement of the chase. And look back at all the water you crossed. Now you see it again, a glistening on a snowy peak. Put on those sturdy boots and stride on and up. The next dream is waiting. This is Sean Petrie, and you're on Texas Standard Time.
You can hear the Typewriter Rodeo every Friday here on The Standard. Got a suggestion for a custom poem? Send it on over and we'll turn it into a little art. But now for the week that was in Texas politics. Jasper Scherer is politics editor for the Texas Tribune. Jasper, welcome back.
Thanks for having me.
Well, this week, the Supreme Court weakened a key provision of the Voting Rights Act, making it harder to bring voter discrimination claims against electoral maps. This was a ruling in a Louisiana case, but what do we know about what this could mean for Texas?
Yeah, I think it really just opens the door for lawmakers to be more aggressively partisan in redrawing the maps, especially looking at the 2027 session when they'll be back in Austin for the first time. The Republicans in control of the legislature famously redrew the congressional maps last summer, but kind of the next frontier that seems to be on the agenda in light of this decision is to redraw potentially the state house and state senate districts. That's kind of the big thing to watch for. A lot more flexibility for Republicans to redraw those districts as they see fit.
New polling this week shows James Tallarico is ahead of both John Cornyn and Ken Paxton in the U.S. Senate race. What are the margins here? I mean, could Texas actually send a Democrat to the Senate?
Yeah, I think the margins were that Tallarico was up several percentage points with a whole bunch of voters still undecided, which is not surprising given how early in the cycle it is. But, I think it's worth remembering just that these polls are snapshots in time. This is how voters feel at this particular moment. And, it's indeed possible that James Tallarico is leading, but Republicans are still dealing with their own runoff. They haven't unleashed all their attack ads and opposition research against Tallarico. So we'll see if these numbers start to change at all once we get polls, after the Republican runoff is settled.
And we want to loop back on our top story today, Camp Mystic, where 25 campers and their 2 young counselors were killed last summer in deadly flooding, was planning to host 800 girls this year. Now they've folded, not operating this summer. What else do we know about this?
Yeah, it seems like there were a few things that could have prompted this decision. There was some pressure coming from Dan Patrick, the lieutenant governor. He was calling on state regulators to not renew the camp's license application. There are also, some active lawsuits and investigations. this, the timing of this is interesting too. It's coming right after this really emotional legislative hearing at the Capitol, where the families of the deceased campers were really pressing the camp organizers on whether they were ready to reopen. So those were some of the things that the camp kind of alluded to in the statement explaining why they made this decision. And so, yeah, I think a lot of kind of relief and maybe a little bit of vindication on the front of the families who were pressing for Camp Mystic not to reopen.
Jasper Scherer is politics editor for the Texas Tribune. Jasper, thanks as always.
Of course, thanks for having me.
And you're listening to the Texas Standard.
Summer camp and what it means after deadly safety failures, the talk of Texas this week. I'm Wells Dunbar with the Texas Standard. As state lawmakers held hearings on last year's Camp Mystic tragedy, which claimed the lives of 25 girls, 2 counselors, and the camp's proprietor, the parents of some of those children also appeared in court facing the family that's run the camp for decades. Amid all this news, perhaps it's not too surprising that Camp Mystic announced yesterday its withdrawn plans to reopen part of the camp this summer. Camps statewide are navigating new safety rules passed after last year's deadly hill country floods. And as we've covered on today's show, with just weeks to go until the end of school, only a handful of Texas camps have been licensed under the updated standards, with operators being asked to strengthen evacuation plans, communication systems, and emergency procedures. For parents, those requirements translate into responsibilities, like who is watching the weather, what happens during an evacuation, and how quickly would families be notified if something goes wrong. Others told us the Camp Mystic tragedy does not make them question camp itself, but whether safety was taken seriously enough. Christina sent in a recording where she's clear-eyed about how things have changed.
The camp I grew up attending was in the piney woods of East Texas. It was my safe place, a shelter from the world. The camp had an emergency plan and enacted it when there were hurricanes and tropical disturbances. The camp was not at all fancy. It was rustic and well cared for. A creek ran through back camp, and as global warming heated up over the last 20-plus years, the trickling creek began to turn into a wall of water during weather events. Cabins that stood for a better part of a century were completely washed away or knocked off their piers and floated around back camp.
And she says the lesson of Mystic is clear.
Walls of water and catastrophic flooding wasn't some distant possibility in the hill country. It had happened before. The camps knew their campers were at risk. Wealth and privilege don't protect camps from flooding or children from drowning. So for me, the drownings at Mystic haven't caused me to think differently about summer camp, but instead confirm for me that safety should be more important than the bottom line. Putting 8-year-olds on a river during climate change is dangerous. It's reckless. What happened was predictable.
Now we want to hear from you. What do you think about all this? Reach out at texasstandard.org/talk and leave us a voice recording about this or anything else that's on your mind. As always, we look forward to hearing from you. I'm Wells Dunbar, and this is The Talk of Texas.
Well, that's it for this week of Texas Standard, but you can always find more over at texasstandard.org and via our socials. If you're in Austin this weekend, check us out at the inaugural KUT Festival. It's a mix of music and conversations about culture and politics, and it's happening Saturday at Central Machine Works and the East End Ballroom. That's in the East 5th area of downtown Austin, and it's all free. Just go to kutfestival.org to RSVP. We'll see you back here Monday with hemp news and challenging so-called junk science cases. Have a great weekend.
Philanthropic support for Texas Standard comes from Casey and Scott O'Hare, the Winkler Family Foundation, Lynn Dobson and Greg Waldridge, Adrian Killam, and the George Huntington family. Would your company or organization like to be a sponsor as well? Contact your local station for opportunities within your community. For statewide sponsorships, visit TexasPublicMediaNetwork.com.